wait for the intro. So welcome to this Truth Seeker channel. This time my guest is BUSHWISPERER, and the name is Control Matrix and Fabrication of History. So would you like to introduce a little bit yourself?
Yes. Namaste. Welcome everybody. I'm Franklin. I'm the Bush Whisperer. I'm a local shaman here from South Africa, Cape Town. So I've been researching many things for the last sort of few decades. And one of the things that's close to my heart that I hope to sort of broach the topic today has got to do with the old world. I discovered it when I was 12 years old in an old set of encyclopedia. And it was an antique encyclopedia in my home, heritage, inheritance from my mom's partner. And came across this thing, Tartaria, in the encyclopedia, and I went to school to ask my teachers, and they said it never existed. I was like, so I thought we could start at that point and sort of look at how that is related to the control matrix as we stand today. Where shall we start?
That sounds interesting. I'm just wondering, your microphone sounds a little bit like it's breaking a little. So you said maybe you have another one.
I'm hearing echo through your side. It's coming back, but it's coming back much later. I think it's a StreamYard reverberation somehow. I don't know if I can't see my microphone button down here at all, by the way. I never had this problem on my system with StreamYard. Like, is your microphone on at the moment? Could that be that it's coming back and forth? I can't mute my microphone when you talk either, by the way.
I can mute your microphone here, or I can mute my microphone when I'm not speaking. So if I mute it now, then maybe it works. I mean, maybe you try to talk and I mute my microphone, then we see if it works better. Now I don't hear anything because you mute your microphone. So if you open it, okay. These are the technical problems we are having right now. Can you unmute your microphone?
I was just listening and I noticed your voice was doing the same thing as my voice. So it must be a StreamYard issue, and I had my mic muted the whole time. So it's definitely a StreamYard issue because my mic was muted for the last sort of 45 seconds. It's been echoing the whole time. And it's obviously not a mic issue. It's I'm not sure how we. It's quite annoying.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing on Monday when I was doing podcast. I also heard the echo, but maybe we can just forget about that and focus on what we're talking about.
Do you have another tab open in the back of your computer, by the way? By any chance? Sometimes if
I had
you
one
put another
open, but
tab
I'll
on
close
the
it
YouTube
now.
or something, it does that. I've noticed in the past. There we go. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. I unmuted my mic. I muted and unmuted, and seems like it's better. So yeah, starting off, the whole story that we've been sold in terms of our history doesn't seem to be very accurate. And much of, what we've been taught in school, as we grow up and we start to research for ourselves, we notice that the wool's been pulled over our eyes. And why is it that, so much of the work that Nikola Tesla did has been hidden from the world? Why did we learn about these alternative scientific ideas? And there are many others, like Keeley, for example, was a great scientist, came up with a lot of inventions and a lot of really interesting engines and perpetual motion devices. They all seem to have been hidden. And here where I live in Cape Town, which is the southern tip of Africa, you can see literally that there is evidence of flooding. So I can go to my local city on the southern tip of Africa, Cape Town, and I can go to one of the places where they're called Mama Africa, and I can sit one floor below the ground where there's a door and windows. They never removed the windows or the doors. Now, nobody builds doors and windows underground, which is clearly a sign of flooding, but there's no history in the archives of a big flood in Cape Town. And there are many buildings with basements that are similarly situated here in Cape Town. In fact, right here in Simonstown, you can find evidence of it. So there seems to have been some kind of a big flood. And I'm not speaking about the great biblical flood because the proportions don't seem to match. But there seems to have been something that's happened. And when we track it, it seems to be the end of the 1700s. There was a lot of stories about the Great Comet and a lot of eyewitness testimonies about fire across the sky and lots of fires burning and lots of fires in the US and, floods and crazy weather. One can only imagine that there must have been some kind of a mud flood. And there's evidence of it everywhere where I've been. India, underground temples. They tell us that they built the temples underground, but I'm walking around in these temples. And I lived in India for many, many years. And I spent a lot of time in India and observed the way they built a lot of their ancient monuments, because it was something that I studied very keenly. And I noticed that the narrative doesn't match the reality. And the same thing can be found in the UK, England, Scotland, everywhere where I went on this planet, I have found evidence of a mud flood. And why was it hidden from us? And why was the information about Tartaria hidden from us? And I had a big argument with my teacher about it. I was only 12 years old. And I had seen it in an encyclopedia. It was a legit encyclopedia set, a set of, I think it was 9 or 10 books. And I was looking for something called Tartarus because I'd been studying occult texts. And I'd read about this Tartarus in some of the particular texts that I'd been reading, old texts. I used to collect old books when I was really young. And instead of finding anything on Tartarus, I found this Tartary. And what it was very boring. It was maps. It was the political structure. It was the economics. It was the population dynamics. It was the topographies. It was a brief history of Tartaria. And I wasn't interested in all of this stuff because I was looking for something very different, right? I wanted to learn about Tartarus, which is an old ancient Greek concept of, the underworld. And I read about this and I thought, well, this is interesting. Like, I've never heard of this Tartary place, right? And my teachers were sure that it was a conspiracy theory. And I was like, no. They said, bring the book to school. But I wasn't allowed to because it was an antique. The set of encyclopedia were more than 200 years old. and they were family heirlooms. So I wasn't even allowed to be opening them, let alone taking them out of the house, right? I wasn't supposed to touch them. But that day, Stuart, my mom's partner, wasn't home. And I thought, ooh, if I'm careful, I can look through here and find this is the only old books where I might find anything about Tartarus. And as I've grown up, I've noticed there's a lot wrong. Like I went to the oldest Anglo-Saxon high school in South Africa, which is Sax. It's from the 1800s. And what I observed in my high school blew my mind because, let me backtrack. I drowned when I was 3 years old. Because I drowned, I crossed over. I was never the same. I was shunned from other children. I had other kinds of abilities. I had other kinds of things happening to me. I would slide into trance. I would predict things that would happen. I predicted people not being alive anymore and how they would not be alive and where. I knew people's secrets. I knew what had happened. Like, of course, divorces and stuff. So people were afraid of me. And other children, when they were around me, they would also slide into a kind of a trance. And we would speak with one voice and we would see beings that weren't physical. And so parents were a bit afraid of me. So I wasn't allowed to play with other children. So I would sit and stare out of the window and contemplate, like, try and make sense out of why I'm alive and what this world is. Because when I passed away as a child, I saw a whole different type of reality. And when you're a child, I drowned. So I didn't lose consciousness. I didn't go to sleep. It's not like one of those usual, life after talks where people are on drugs in hospitals. I was fully conscious and fully awake. It was very painful. It was excruciating. I literally was forced out of my body by like a little popping of a thing in my head. Experienced other worlds, other realities. The whole universe was inside out. I watched myself go to another place. I became like an adult because all of my memories were stripped from me. And then I was forced back into my body because I was pulled out of the swimming pool and resuscitated. And there happened to be a hospital right next door. And I was there consciously watching the whole thing. So I had these experiences that need to be explained. And so my research took me into the occult. And I attracted masters of Rosicrucians that took me under their wing and showed me the library and introduced me into occult texts, explained to me that I was different because I'd crossed over and that I had to learn to control these things that I had learned to experience or else they would haunt me. So I started my training when I was really young. And then I met a Japanese master who started teaching me Zazen. So my whole life was very based upon like trying to understand why I'm here. What's the meaning of life? What is going on around me? Why are all the adults a bit ill? Why are they all unhappy? Why are they all stressed? There's something wrong with the world. There's something wrong with people. And in my high school, there used to be groups of Masons, and it wasn't a secret that our Old Boys Foundation was connected to the Masons. It wasn't even a secret in my high school. We were shown the heritage of our school, and we were told that if we did well, we could be inducted into the Old Boys, into the Masons, and we could have a great future for ourselves. And many of the boys were very interested in this. And I didn't come from a lot of money. I only went to this high school because I had a natural ability for physics. I had a natural ability for languages and for sports. And so I was like one of the poorer kids in the school with children that had like tennis courts and stuff like that at their homes. And I was like always a bit embarrassed about we just lived in a normal little cottage, 3 bedrooms with a nice garden, but it wasn't like the mansions all my friends lived in. And so this had sort of pushed me on my life to go on a journey. And what I noticed when I went on this journey, which was self-discovery, was certain themes kept coming up for me again and again. And I would slip into trance where I would remember other lives, other things, other times. And the memories I was having, there were giant people around. And I was like, why are there no giants? Where are they? Why am I remembering these big people? Because they're not here. So I started researching. I started noticing, hold on, there were giants. It's not just in the Bible. It's not just in, many ancient texts, by the way. There's a list of ancient texts, the length of your arm, outlining the giants. And this got me asking more questions. And that took me down rabbit holes, which I'd like to share with you. One of the things I want to talk to you about is the architecture of Tartaria, right? This incredible, incredible place. Something I noticed when I went to London and I lived I was traveling for 20 years. So I was abroad most of my life, or a big chunk of my adult life I was traveling. Most of that I spent in India, lived in Sri Lanka for some years, spent a lot of time in Nepal, a lot of time in the Himalayas. I lived in the jungles barefoot. I lived in all sorts of places, even uncovering little ruins in jungles. You'll be surprised what you can find deep in the jungles. It will blow your mind. And what blew my mind was when I went into these old ancient buildings, which I was always fascinated by. And I would see the structure of the building. And I'd done a little bit of building as a boy, so I could appreciate the work. When I was 15, 16, my mom's partner, whose ancient books I had, his old encyclopedias I had looked at, borrowed naughtily, he had a building company. So I used to do some roofing work with him when I was 15, 16, 17, and worked with him doing roofing. So I had experience of building, and I could see like, this is not the kind of building that I've seen, right? You spend some time on building sites and you see the way we build, and I would look at these structures and I'd be like, this is not possible. You cannot build this with a horse cart. And the incredible acoustics, if you go into a cathedral and you sing, I'm a singer, I sing, I chant, I spend a lot of time vocalizing my voice. If you spend time looking at some of these cathedrals on the inside and making a sound with your voice, you will notice that the acoustics is so incredible. The mathematics required to build a structure like that is incredible. And the building has got to be but perfect. The only other place I have found such acoustics are in very ancient temples in India, where I noticed that if you would sit in particular places and chant, your chanting would come back at you in waves. You would feel them bouncing against your body because like the sound would somehow be concentrated and focused back onto you. And these ancient temples, you can find them in the north of India. And so they had this knowledge in the ancient times, and it's all been hidden from us. And the question is why, right? Like why would they hide our heritage from us? Why would they hide the fact that we had higher technology in the past, possibly than what we have now? If we look at the pyramids, if we look, there are some 1,000-ton single monolithic stones, Ethiopia, for example, that people can't account for, right? We've got cranes that can move like 250 tons, 400 tons, 500 tons. 1,000 tons is a lot of stone. And if you've got a single piece of stone, 1,000 ton, how do you justify moving it from a quarry 50 miles away? It just doesn't make sense, especially if you're using horse carts. And one of the things that really wound me up was when I was in high school, I quit art because of it. My art teacher wanted me to do art because apparently I was quite good at painting. I didn't think I could do art. I didn't think I was very good, but she liked the way I played with color. And I just thought, I'm just messing around. I don't think it's very good. But she really tried to keep me. And I said to her, look, I can't do history of art. I'm sorry. That nonsense about the pyramids has turned me off art, because they wanted us to believe that the pyramids were built by people with rollers. But the stones, we're talking about 50-ton stones, 100-ton stones, some of them, right? 80 tons. And my logic was like, no, I'm sorry. You don't carry such big pieces of rock on rollers with donkeys. It's just not viable. So there's been a lot of ancient information and knowledge and secrets that's been hidden from us. And I got access to quite a lot of this knowledge in the Rosicrucian schools because I was inducted into mystery schools. This was before I became a shaman. I had a natural ability. So if you've got a natural ability, they want to bring you into their fold, right? They want to bring you into their circle. And even though I wasn't formally a Rosicrucian, I was inducted in as a young boy because it was explained to me that you have what is called a materialization body type, and people like you are valuable. We need people like you in this fraternity because you have the abilities that we're all trying to develop, because you drowned. And most of us, it was explained to me that they do mock rituals, which is pretending to cross over. But like when you actually cross over, it's a very different experience. And so they had guided me along the lines of reading books and provided me with a lot of reading material, which blew my mind. And I was like, how can this information be out there, right? Because everybody else doesn't know about it. And they explained to me, well, the information's available, but it's secreted, right? It's random little published press with a random little book that doesn't actually describe what the book's about. It's such a weird label on the book that not many people are going to be interested in it, except those that have been told to look for that book with that cover, with that label. And when they open it, what has got inside it is not what you expected. And so this really sort of inspired me. And I trained hard to develop my ability to meditate. And that became sort of the whole path of my life. And through those processes, that took me to India. And India was for me the biggest eye-opener you can imagine. Because those temples, you can spend hours just sitting, staring at the wall, literally. Because the wall's made out of little men. And you can stare up and the wall's made out of little men. The entire building is made out of little people. And it blows my mind, like, how did they do the architectural structuring? How did they get this whole building to stand up there? And it's made out of little men, little figures and elephants and, you know. And I think that we're living in an age now where a lot of this information is coming out. And, you know, with the Epstein files, right? And I don't like to call them the Epstein files because I think that's a woke personification, and they're trying to make it about one man in the past, right? Instead of it's about one man that happened to be at the center, the nexus of a group. And that group was powerful people, politicians from every country, Supreme Court judges, Hollywood's who's who, producers, directors, actors, people in media moguls, and also, you know, you look at his girlfriend, you look at his involvement with intelligence services in Israel, his Mossad connections. When you start to notice, this man is at the hub of a very secret society. And a lot of these documents coming up are actually very specifically outlining his lodge work and his knowledge of the occult. And that knowledge of the occult isn't just randomly achieved, right? Like, one has to be somehow inducted into that knowledge. And this is, I think, giving us an insight into something that's been considered a conspiracy theory for many years. But now we've got a lot of evidence tying a lot of very rich and very powerful people into a secret cabal. And the secret cabal is connected at the heart. We look at our information, for example, all the great universities, they were the Rothschilds that funded it, right? Without the Rothschilds funding, PhDs and doctorates wouldn't exist today. So the funding started at the root level, education. They started changing the way people thought. There are even archives where you can find old school ledgers and photographs where there were women in the classrooms in the 1700s. And then there were letters sent from the deans to other deans in the archives that students, historical students, look at them and they come, this doesn't match the history. Where this dean is explaining to the other dean, this is the strategy we're going to do to get the woman out of university. It's almost like they wanted to create a man-controlled society because they've been wanting to play the sexes off against each other. And we can see this in, you know, you look at Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda and advertising as we know it. That helped the big cigarette companies to get where they were. And then his knowledge, which was really gained from his uncle, who was Sigmund Freud, was thus propagated and used in advertising, which is now basically a huge part of, you know, our world. And so they've hidden all of this stuff from us. They've controlled our societies. They've controlled what we think. They've controlled our education systems. They've controlled the legislation, right? Because if you can control the education system of how the lawyers get trained and how the lawyers that are going to become judges have been trained and indoctrinated and, you know, mind controlled in the schools, because let's face it, we learn far more about how to behave in school than actually how to think. We learn about how to repeat what we've learned, repeat what we've read. There's not much integral thinking in schooling, unfortunately, and you don't learn the skill set that you need. You don't go to school and come out and learn to create a business. You don't learn how to file your taxes. You don't learn how to, how to keep your body healthy. You don't learn about nutrition. You don't learn any of the important stuff that you need to know. You come out of school dumb to most of that stuff, and then you get an expert to do that for you. You get an expert doctor to look after your health. You don't know what to eat? It's fine. There's an advert to tell you what you feel like eating, you know? And so we've been sort of mind controlled from every different angle, every level. And a big part of that has been reshaping our history, removing our true history. When you take a history away from someone, you take away their heritage. When you take away their heritage, you take away their potential towards discovering their roots. And discovering their roots gives you a sense of who you are in this world. And if you know who you are, you become empowered. And if you're empowered, you cannot be controlled and manipulated into a political hegemony, which is what we've got. And it's pretending to be democracy, but I don't think democracy is really awake in this world.
Yeah, it sounds very, very interesting. There's a lot of things that I was thinking. Well, for example, this thing about the pyramids, and I read some theories. They say that, well, obviously people use the power of the mind, like this telekinesis, to move the stones. So, what do you think about that? Like, have you found any evidence of those things also in other parts of the world than just Egypt?
My first experience of that was with Shihan Chris Thompson, and he's a master of karate. And he was my teacher when I was 12. He taught me Zazen. That's where I first learned to meditate.
Did you mute your microphone on purpose?
I'm so sorry, my mic was muted. So yeah, my first experience of that was with a Shihan Chris Thompson. And a Shihan, just so you know, is a Japanese term. It's not a teacher, it's a master. And a master is somebody that it's not a grade you can get, it's a grade you get awarded by the other masters. And it involves mastering your ki, right? This is a Japanese school. If it was a Chinese school, it would be chi. And I was inducted into his senior classes when I first started training because he looked at me and he could see something in me because he was a master. And he pulled me aside and he said to me, I want you to come to my classes with the other senseis. Now I was a white belt, right? I was like, okay. And he picked certain classes for me, and the classes were Zazen, learning to meditate, learning to breathe, learning to focus on your ki. And he explained to me that the reason he had pulled me aside was because he could see that the spirit was strong in me. And he wanted me to learn this ki control, because he could see I would need it for my life. And one of the things that I witnessed was him doing a demonstration in his class. Now, he only taught for the senseis. So all the other people in the classes were like second, third, fourth, not even second, maybe third, fourth, fifth Dan, right? All the other he taught the teachers. And I was this little boy. I was like, what am I doing here? These guys are like real martial artists. I'm like, I'm nothing. And one of the things he did was to show how he could project his ki outside of his body. And he knocked a beer. He got a clear glass mug, and he put it at a distance, and he showed how he could throw his force more than a meter, and knock this thing over. And for me, that was like, wow, right? I was like, okay, that's, this is real. And I'd known about it. I'd learned about it. I'd seen, lots of texts. My experiences had been out of the body. As a child, I used to travel out of my body all the time, and I used to remember other times and other things. And I could sometimes see the future. Like if it came to me, a flash would come to me, and I'd know like this person's going to be in a car accident in that time, and that's going to happen. And I would know the date. I would know random details like that I couldn't know. And I told my neighbors this is why I was, ostracized, because I said like, that man's going to crash his car on that day at that time of the morning at that place, and he's going to not be in this world anymore. And then it happened. And then they said I'd cursed him, right? So now I was the evil guy, and then they used to call me Devil's Kind, which means devil's child. And the adults would literally cross the road if they saw me coming, and they'd keep their kids away from me. So I obviously had experiences of the world not being what it seems as a child, but this was where I saw someone who could control it, right? He could literally control that energy, that power. And so I trained hard at my martial arts, obviously. There were times when I experienced that as well, not by choice, just happening, right? By accident, where I did something that's not possible, right? Like I can't do. Like there was one time when we were playing in the change room, and a bigger boy came at me, and he lost his temper because we were playing the fool, and he came in and attacked me, punch, and I block, and out of the blue, I hit him with ki, and it lifted him off his feet, and he traveled about 10 foot, 8, 9, 10 foot, and then he bounced off of a wall onto the ground, and I was like, oh my God, what happened? And everybody was like, what just happened? Because like I shouldn't be able to do that with a bigger boy than me. And so I was a little bit afraid of it, to be honest, because like I couldn't, it would sometimes just happen. But to see a man who had that mastery was incredibly inspiring for me. And that's actually what started my meditation career. And here's an interesting point. This is a point that I so let me start with the Tartarian, the giants, for a moment. I've got a couple of clips here, a couple of images that you guys might like. It's the second one, if you could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here we can see these are images from the 1800s. These are images from Siberia. There were a lot of these giants, and there are records for this. There's paperwork, the employment. There were actually letters written and reviews done about them, and the reviews were that they were very productive, they worked very hard. Many of these, you can see perspective is quite clear. There's a lot of records of giants. Actually, if you go back in time, you will often see buildings with big doors and little doors cut into them, and we're just told we did that for fun, right? But there's more to this, and this is not that long ago. Right, this is not that long ago. What happened to them? And there's a number of these images that you can find, right? And these Siberian workers worked really hard. They would lug around branches. Some of them were big. At the places in Siberia where they worked, there were actually giant beds and special accommodations made that were bigger than everything else. So there was actual paper trails, as well as physical evidence, as well as photographic evidence to the fact that these giants, they had all been sent to Siberia for some reason. We don't know why. We don't know who did it. The history has been covered up. And you can often see like some of these people are massive, some of these people are big. And there are also, to this day, gigantic books that we have, gigantic swords, gigantic tools, gigantic shoes, gigantic things that we've got that people say, well, that was just made for fun. Another thing is the trees. In America, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of photographs of these absolutely massive, gigantic trees that were basically all chopped down. And it seems like not so long ago on this world, things were much bigger to me, or there was the potential for trees to be much bigger. People, it seems, too. And moving on to the Tartarian buildings, this is just one example of these ancient buildings. The craftsmanship, the beauty, they all have these spires on the roof, many of them. And many of the spires on the roof even look like they are Tesla coils on many of the buildings. Like I've looked at London cathedrals, and some of these buildings are just absolutely immaculate. This one I think is in Russia. And to imagine building something like this with a camel, with a horse cart, without technologies is beyond anything you can imagine on dirt roads, right? Some of these cathedrals, you can go to these cathedrals. I'm sure where you live in Finland, there must be some very old buildings, right? Some really spectacularly old cathedrals and buildings, probably for you to be able to go and view, because there must be a lot of history there, especially with the Norse background. And I think like the Norse tradition speaks about the giants, right? And now we're supposed to believe that these are just myths. But actually, maybe the Norse, along with the Sumerians, along with India, they also speak about gigantic beings. Along with many of the scrolls, there's the book of the giants called the Oglia. There's versions of these books in Syrian, in Persian, in Arabic, in ancient Greek. The Hebrew version we know well, the Nephilim and the Anakim. I mean, everybody's talking about that. And a lot of these buildings seem like there's something that's been hidden here. And if we look at them, I think they've lied to us about the age of the buildings. Here is an example of an inside amphitheater of a cathedral, which is just, if you look at this, like, how do you build that? I don't even know whether we have the capacity to build these buildings the way they built it today. Because of the acoustics, you've got to take so much into account. There's no trial by error. It wasn't built and then there's an almost good one and then a better one and a better one. They are all built immaculate and perfect, and the acoustics is just perfect in these cathedrals. Whoever built them knew what they were doing, and they had learned over centuries or thousands of years, however long it took them to learn that level of craftsmanship. They just vanished. And there's quite a lot that I think we can gain from this when we look at it, that gives us an insight into the levels of technology. Now, you spoke about telekinesis, and there are these ley line energy currents on the earth, right? And a lot of modern science will say, well, ley lines don't exist, right? Like we have no scientific evidence of ley lines existing. And I actually went to go and take a little look to find some articles that speak about this. And then I'll give you an insight into like what ley line energy is and why it's so incredibly important, right? In gardening, for example, I was a coordinator of the Festival of Life in England, which is one of these sort of top raw food vegan festivals. And I became very closely connected to the Permaculture Association in London Society. And obviously, there's a lot of knowledge out there. If you were to take long rods of wood and you coil it with copper, right? And you root this into the ground where you're growing your food, right? And you make aerials, that affects your plant growth considerably. And I've seen people doing demonstrations, right, in London, showing like, okay, look at this garden with the copper coils, and over there's a garden without it. And the difference is marked. These plants are bigger and healthier. Those plants are not. They're getting the same water. They're on the same system, irrigation. There's no reason for these plants. And so there's quite a lot of people out there on the web, and you can find out about it if you want, if you're growing plants, how to get the maximum tilt. And this has got to do with the energy, the electromagnetic energy running through the earth grid, right? And this electromagnetic energy is interfacing with the energy in the air, right? So I think like at the top of a building, I think you're hitting like tens of thousands of volts. I think it's 100 volts per meter, right? That's what I believe it is, 100 volts per meter. So where we're standing, it's like we're in the 200 volt range, close to our heads. This is like the electrical potential in the atmosphere. And when you go up like, 30 meters, you're looking at 3,000 volts, right? And some of these buildings are like big buildings. They're much bigger than 30 meters. 30 meters is what? 3 or 4 floors? So imagine a building that's 8 or 10 floors high, right? And or 20 floors high, like some of these incredible buildings are. And we've got to understand that there are levels of the building that are underground. And there's a lot of underground networks connecting these buildings. And this has been documented. You can even find it in the archives. And they are usually locked off. They are usually closed off. I've gone to try and get access to some in London. No, you're not allowed in there. Why? Health and safety. That's their excuse. Okay, fair enough. But there's definitely a lot more going on under the ground than what we know about. And they tell us in our films. James Bond, Where does James Bond go? He goes to the London Bridge, and there's a special place where he drives in, and there's an elevator that goes down in his car, right? He goes down under the ground into some secret network down there under the ground, and they've got underground things. And they're even telling us in our films, right? Because, you know, it makes sense. If you were going to have a security place for national security, you would want it underground because it would be in a bunker, naturally. Because in the event of a war, then your intelligence would be safe, because that would be necessary for your deployment of your troops and your you know, whatever. These days it would be drones. So I do think that understanding these buildings is quite a big step, and looking at the energy that is running now. This energy is a combination of different elements, right? On one hand, you've got quartz. Actually, it's a silica. It's a silica base, and you've got the outer core of the earth, and you've got the mantle where you've got the molten rock, and the mantle is full of metals, right? It's full of iron, it's full of radioactive radium and various different kinds of metals that are discharging radioactive energy, producing heat and energy. And you got metal, which is moving in high heat under extremely high pressure. And this is grating against the core of the earth, right? And let me pull up some slides. And I've actually got I've actually got a link that I had here as well, which I'll link in. Where can I put the link? I don't know where I can put the link. Comments. There we go. So maybe I can put the link down here in the comments. Can I?
Yeah, you can try. You mean it will come then after we finish?
Yeah. I don't think I can.
What about this?
But
yeah.
It's all good. If you could put one of those.
Like this.
Yeah. Okay, so like here we've got an idea of. So this is one of the publications that I linked in, but you can go and find it for people that are interested. You know, it's AGU Publications, Journal of Geographical Research, authors by Richmond and Casson. Sorry, I don't know what I did. I accidentally touched the screen, the mouse. Casson, and they're discussing the whole atmosphere response to changes in the Earth's magnetic field and the vertical coupling, right, between the thermosphere and the troposphere, and just exactly how this works. And so if we look at it more deeply, you could say that the Earth's magnetic field, the upper atmosphere, in various ways, it influences the conductivity in the ionosphere, right? And the ionosphere, plasma transport processes. So there's actually a transport system of plasma moving between the Earth and the ionosphere, or electrical potential energy moving, that is being turned and changed and transformed. Plasma is moving between the magnetosphere, the ionosphere, and this is what's coupling the ionosphere and the thermosphere to the solar wind, to the magnetosphere, right? And this is mind-blowing, right? So the solar wind is coming from the sun. Now, the energy is leaking out of the Earth, but it's leaking along very particular pathways, right? And there are these networks of force lines that are specifically geomagnetic field lines, right? And this is created by the friction produced in the mantle with the magma against the outer core, where there is a silica deposit. And the silica is pushed out as high pressure, high heat, and silica is highly piezoelectric. And the silica has water with it. Believe it or not, water inside, underneath the molten. It's quite mind-blowing when you think about it. And this friction produces powerful frequencies that affect the electrical currents. And the electrical currents, by the way, for people that know, are affected by cymatics. And cymatics is vibrations of sound. So audio cymatic vibrations can interface with electrical currents. This is why electrical currents can make sound, right? In the same way that electrical currents, I don't know what happened there. Did it just fall off?
Oh, should I put it back? I can put it back because I was thinking.
Oh, yeah. These field lines connect the ionosphere to the magnetosphere. So I'll just run through this quickly, and people can take a look. So there is the paper, which is really studying space weather and magnetism and how it affects the magnetic field. So the Earth's magnetosphere is 100 kilometers up, right? And it extends for several hundred kilometers. And here's the interesting thing: the compression created by the compression that's created by the solar wind compresses it down to about under 10 times the radius of Earth, right? But when the sun isn't there to compress it, it's 1,000 times the radius of Earth. So while the sun's above us, the magnetosphere is compressed to 100th or less, between 100th or 1/200th of its size. And at the back end, the tail end, it expands. And so the expanded part is what we call the night side, the tail end of it. And so there's this powerful energetic shift happening with the sun. This is why the ancient Egyptians worshiped the sun, because the sun and the inside of the earth are interacting, and this is causing plasma discharges. They also have lots of other theories out there relating to different kinds of frequencies of light, right, that actually penetrate into the earth. Cosmic rays and other sorts of rays, because the visible light spectrum is a very, very small spectrum. That's like 300 to 800 nanometers. But we're talking about a huge electromagnetic spectrum, what we call light. So everything is electromagnetics. Light is electromagnetics. In fact, if we look at matter is also the same thing. It's just a different frequency. And the different frequencies are what regulate it. Like, why were the alchemists turning lead into gold? Well, you only have to shift one electron from one thing to another thing to alter the lead, and you can turn into gold. And no, they weren't trying to create gold. They were making ormus. And ormus is a very special monatomic gold that can be used to change the gravity of substances. So if you had ormus, you could move big rocks to build pyramids, right? And it's spoken about in all the ancient alchemist records. It's spoken about that the manna from heaven that fell from heaven almost can be created naturally, through reactions of meteorites. Imagine a meteorite coming into the earth, the high pressure, the high heat, changing the gold being monotomized and falling to earth like white bread, and people eating that and no longer having to eat food. And it's been said to be able to extend people's lives. This is why we have lots of ancient stories of people living very long lives. If you look at Sumerians' king lists, we're talking thousands of years. How can a human live thousands of years? So, there's a lot out there that have been kept from us. So these currents moving through the earth, they're called telluric ground currents. They are semi-permanent. So now we're talking about ley lines, right? We're talking about electromagnetic field currents that are running through the earth. They're semi-permanent. The intensity and direction can fluctuate. The sun has a huge effect on them, right? The radiation, because both the earth is a capacitor and both there's currents going in, and partially because of the solar wind compressing the magnetosphere. And this is affecting the discharge of all of the plasma. And the plasma, for those of you that don't know, it's like it's another element. It's not a gas. It's not a solid. It's almost pure energy, but it has mass. It's something that scientists are really breaking into now. They're trying to get a better understanding of what plasma is. But this discharge of plasma through the atmosphere is really an important process for the sun's solar wind to be coupled to the magnetosphere, to the ionosphere, to the various different bands of the atmosphere, right down into the earth. This is why lightning happens. right? Lightning is a discharge of these energies that build up because of repolarization of electrical potential in clouds. And that repolarization means that builds up a potential up there that's got to be released, and then the earth and the cloud together create the release, like a spark, which comes from both directions. So and another thing to understand is, the friction. Now, this is what I was talking about. The boundaries between the earth mantle and the outer core, the core mantle boundary that's called the CMB, are known to influence electromagnetic phenomenon, though the specific mechanism described friction on silicon, right? This is just what I was talking about. And this is why crystals are important. This is why we need to use crystals for all of our technology, for computers, for such and such, because sorry, I got the so the silicon is acting as like on the boundaries between the core and the mantle. This is where there's this chemical thermal reaction happening, and the silicon is like pushed out of the core like dust, and it's like this dust covering, and it's being rubbed against by the hot metals that are like magnetic, right, producing these energy. And so they speak about the friction mechanical coupling, which is creating a piezoelectric reaction, but it's on a massive scale. And the electric field generation, while the main earth magnetic field is generated by the dynamo in the molten outer core, the friction and interaction of the CBM, known as the electromagnetic coupling, right? This is important because that CBM, that quartz, that silica is what's part of the coupling process between the inside of the earth and right out there in the magnetosphere that is moving with the sun, and moving like a lot of times, like 100 to 200 times the distance. Like it's this big, then it's that big. It's this big, it's that big, depending on if the sun is shining on it, or the solar wind specifically. And so this frictional mechanical coupling is what produces this electrical field generation, or modulation of the electrical field is probably a better way of putting it. And this is responsible, or works in tandem with the solar wind. So the solar wind is connected to the inside of our earth. This is why sticking copper pipes into your soil will make your food grow better, because the sun is bringing the force of life. And without the sun, there would be no sugar. All sugars on earth are made through photosynthesis. There can be no other source of sugar. And that sugar is taken into animals' bodies, stored, and we eat this or we eat that. Wherever sugar is crystallized sunlight. So plants are like alchemists. They alchemize the energy of the sun and turn it into little crystals that they can then digest. And we then eat them to get these little crystals, which is little crystallized pieces of sunlight, prana, life force, energy, and that gets released into our body, and it gives us the energy of the sun in our body so that we can generate heat and have a metabolism. So this is like interesting when we look at how the bioelectrical body works in relation to this, process that's moving through the earth. And so it's called the silicate dynamo. This is what it's called by the scientists. And in the earth, the studies have suggested that during the early hotter stages of the earth, this was generating the field. So this was before the mantle had completely solidified. And so there were different frequencies then. So what we're suggesting is that maybe in the old times, things were different on the earth, right? Now, in a lot of our ancient stories, it says that the Great Flood was caused because water came out of the earth. So if that had crystallized, a lot of water would have come out of the earth. Think about it. And this could be like part and parcel for why we'll find like some places where the coastline is 200 meters lower than what it is now, hundreds of meters, like down there, caves. We found caves down here, Cape Town, very deep, with Bushmen in it, 200,000, 150,000 years old, with fireplace intact. So it was protected in the cave, the fossils. And they could date it, obviously, because it was, it was burning carbon, coals. And so anyway, this friction can cause the water-bearing silica. It's called stishovite. Yeah, stishovite. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. In the deep mantle, and this can actually get tuned in to become a super ionic state where hydrogen atoms, right? Hydrogen atoms, we're thinking fusion, cold fusion, right? Or atomic reactions, move fluidly with the rigid silicon oxygen lattice. So these hydrogen atoms are rubbing across them. They're not quite breaking, but they're releasing the energy and the potential of the hydrogen atom onto these silicon lattices, and leading to high electrical conductivity and potential electrical heterogeneity, which is local electrical fields. So you've got all these electrical fields being generated in the earth, and around this, there's all these molten metals, and it's generating this electromagnetic field. And as we saw before, these fields are semi-permanent on the earth's crust, right? And here's where it gets really interesting. So there's a continuous presence, as we've seen, right? The diurnal characteristics, the movement, but where it gets interesting, if you read below here, the influence and conductivity, the strength and path of these currents are determined by the electrical conductivity of the ground. Okay, interesting. Meaning they tend to follow geological structures. So these lines of energy are moving on the earth, and geological structures, faults, mountains, hills, or a big superstructure that's been built that's got a metal rod running into the earth that could be mimicked by humans. Now you start to understand what these cathedrals are, right? Consistently allowing the so the geophysicists are trying to map this energy on the surface. Now, typically science doesn't believe in ley lines, but when you compare this information and research to what we know about the mythical stories of ley lines, you go, okay. So this is affected by structures, geological structures, and the geological structures have quite a big effect on them. Now, there was another one that I wanted to show you where I clipped where they speak about water. It's affected by water, right, in a big way. Here they speak about how they generally flow towards the sun on the day side, right? So the diurnal currents, these currents, semi-permanent pattern of daily variation, often flowing in large consistent loops that move between the sunlit and shaded sides of the earth, right? So they're moving between the sun and moving through the earth, these currents, right? And they are normally moving towards the sun. So when the sun's on one side, the currents are moving through the earth towards the sun, empowering that, and it's obviously affecting the electrical potential on the crust itself. And there is somewhere where it says about water. But anyway, I mean, you can take this off. Oh, one thing I was going to say, I did put a clip here about the key characteristics and facts about plasma for people that are interested, right? So it's an ionized gas that has been energized to the point where electrons are no longer bound in atomic nuclei. This is quite head trip. It's the closest we can get to atomic breakdown without atomic breakdown. It's not quite an atomic bomb, but like the gases are not bound to nuclei, which is quite a head trip if you think about it. It's a mixture of free electrons and positive ions. That's what plasma is. Its most common state in matter is visible in stars and in solar winds, nebulas. So in solar winds, this is where we're getting this pounding into our ionosphere and our magnetosphere by this. And this is moving energy through the solar wind directly into the earth, back towards the sun. So it's this interplay of energy. And so lightning, aurora borealis, these are like examples of plasma reactions, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that's basically, unlike gas, plasma can conduct electricity. That's another important point. And react strongly to electromagnetic fields, which is what these people are writing is all about. You can remove this. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
So what this means is, and these currents, these telemagnetic currents in the earth are affected by water, flowing water. So this is why dowsing works, right? You hold dowsing rods and you can feel the water under the ground because there's an electromagnetic reaction. If you've dowsed, it's quite an interesting feeling. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Like you take off your shoes and you can actually feel the water through your feet if you practice it quite a bit. It's quite interesting. I lived barefoot in the jungle, so I never wore shoes for like long periods of time, for like a year and a half of my life. And that was in Sri Lankan jungles where it was warm. And I was training. I was living in, deep in the jungle, as far away from everything and everyone. And like my friends were the elephants and like leopards and big snakes and like wild boar and creatures with lots of horns, and try to stay away from the crocodiles, But you'll find that our bodies have an electromagnetic field. And so the electromagnetic field of our bodies are sensitive to the electromagnetic fields in the earth. And so when you hold these dowsing rods, the electromagnetic field of your body is reacting to the electromagnetic field of the earth, and your nerves get triggered by this potential, and that causes you to move, right? It's an unconscious triggering of movement. So that's why these rods will rotate and move around in your hands, even though you're not moving them. Something inside your body is causing this reaction. And so, I mean, this is real. Like people that are digging boreholes here in Cape Town, they pay people to dowse. They pay a dowser to come because it's a lot cheaper to pay a guy to dowse, and he says, dig the hole there, and you dig the hole there. If you dig the hole there, it's going to cost a lot more money. So if you're going to have a borehole made on your property, you may as well pay a little bit of money extra for a dowser to come and advise you where to do. And then you tell the borehole company, dig the hole there, because if you dig the hole there and you pay like 10,000 euros and you don't get water, then you're going to have to make another hole. It's another 10,000 euros. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the reality of it. So yeah, these currents in the earth are why these structures are built. And that's why a lot of these old Tartaria buildings have got aerials on top of them, right? They are like electrical conductors, and they are siphoning the electricity from the earth and from the sky, and they're acting as a modulator. And I mean, I don't have specific information. There's a lot of people with theories about it. All that I can say is, well, there's a lot of potential that can be used for when it comes to health, when it comes to maybe even learning to modulate that into electricity, right? If you had huge crystal can change energy from one form to another, right? Crystals is why we use them in our radios. Take a wave, turn it into a different frequency, and we can turn that into sound. And so a crystal is like a really interesting thing because it's got a consistent 60 hertz vibration, and it's piezoelectric. So any current you put onto it, it reacts with an equal current. So that makes it a modulator. That's why we sort of, I suppose, have Silicon Valley making computers, because these things have got to modulate. They have to be able to receive information and give information at the same time. And now, how does this relate to the Tartarian buildings? Is that these buildings seem to be put on places where there are particularly high fields of electromagnetic currents. And there's often water, underground water, that you can find and you can track. And so it's very interesting. Very often they're near rivers. And what you often have near rivers is underground rivers. It's very common, right? Because the water's coming there. There would be caves down there where the water's also flowing down there, right? And these things would be tacked into or near where the water is, because the water is diamagnetic, dielectric. It's going to change the frequency. And, this is why I think a lot of these older buildings were here. I think there was a greater purpose to them. And our technology has been hidden from us. It's all been militarized. So we don't get access to know the true potential of our technology because, it's monetary, it's monetized, it's militarized. And big companies own the patents, and they don't want us to get the patents because they would rather us pay money for something else. I mean, imagine there was such a thing as free energy, right? Well, what can you count on? Like the big corporations would make sure that we don't get hold of it because they've got too much invested into the energy market. Oil, electricity, coal, nuclear power. There's so much money in it. And this ley line energy and currents is the same kind of energy that powers our bodies. So the earth you could think of as like a living thing. It's got these same living currents of energy that we have running through our bodies, which generates our electromagnetic field, and our heart beats. And the pulse of our heart. So if you look at what your blood is, it's a plasma of iron, silicate, different things. The red blood corpuscles, for example, red blood cells, they rub and generate energy, electrical potential in the body. People don't know this. This is why the red blood cells are so important. The white blood cells, as we know, they charge up with energy, and they become so charged with energy that they're like little magnets. And if there's a foreign body, they will attract that foreign body towards it, and they will just lock into it and become inert. And then that will be, expelled through the body, through the urine or sweat or however it's coming out of the body. And but these red blood cells actually have platelets, and these platelets actually have effects. They remodulate and change the frequency of the electrical potential running through the blood. And the blood is full of electrical potential. It's one of the reasons I believe that those cabals practice sacrifice, like the dark magical cabals. People don't believe it's real, but it's real. I could tell you stories of things that I've experienced. I used to sit on the mountain at night when I was young and meditate, and I'd climb alone in the dark, and I'd see these people coming past, dressed in garb, masonry garb. And I'd be like, what the hell? They didn't see me. I was like, thank God. My guides would come to me and say, don't let them see you. You're in danger. I'd be like, I'm in danger of these people? No, but I'm a national championship martial arts fighter. What can they do to me? No. Settle down, buddy. Your life's in danger. And I would hear them go and do their chants, and I wouldn't want to get too close to them. I could feel the energy that they were building, and I was very concerned. And this is what caused me to take my other students from my school at night to the school. And I'd say, tonight is a special alignment of planets, and it's a special solstice calendar event. Just come and sit with me and watch. And they'd come and sit with me and watch. We'd hide in the dark. I'd say, wear black hoodie, and take a hoodie and cut holes in your eyes. You don't want to be seen. And we would watch out our headmaster and senior staff marching around with regalia, funny gowns, big staves, all sorts of things, going into the old boys foundation room where they would go under the pool, where there was some kind of a old door where none of us ever went near. We weren't allowed to. And they had a special room underneath the swimming pool, right? Like we had an Olympic swimming pool. Underneath the pool, they would do whatever they did. And the other students were like, they were freaked out. They were like, what kind of a school are we at, dude? And I was like, that's Masonic stuff, mate. That's what's going on here. And I was explaining to the students that like there's something going on in the world that's not right. And I understood this when I was 15. I knew like there's something wrong. Who are the people that are in charge of our world they're not who we think they are. And so we hear about these Epstein stories and what's been done and children and, terrible stories. And, this story of ritual, black magic rituals. A lot of people think it's too far-fetched. But when you start to look into the ancient scrolls, you start to realize, hold on, these people have specially built their structures on particular points. They've taken the old Tartaric buildings over as government points, and they use that. You can literally send energy into the earth, like consciousness, because our consciousness is an electromagnetic field. So what we forget, we think that it's in our brains, but is it in your brain? What's around your brain is an electromagnetic field. And when that electromagnetic field goes away, there's nothing in your brain, right? So that electromagnetic field needs to be present, and it can be measured from the body. Like some people have a strong electromagnetic field. They can measure it from like 3, 4, 5 feet from the body. Most people, the EEG can pick it up 1 or 2 feet from the body, right? And this is what an EEG is doing. It's measuring the electromagnetic field. It's not actually looking into the brain. It's looking into the electromagnetic field around the brain. And it's reading that. And by looking at that, it can tell us what's happening in the brain as per the field that's covering that part of the brain. So these electromagnetic fields can be charged with thought. This is what magic is. This is what occult rituals do. And these people get together and they have centers all around the world, and they do rituals at the same point, at important points into the earth. And they send this information, electromagnetic charge information, into the earth, and they can, in a very subtle way, plant information into the earth that we will get, because what we're getting from the earth is more than just physical sustenance. We're uploading and downloading energy, and that energy has got a quality to it, right? And people wonder, like, why the world has become so corrupted in this modern time. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the people that are ruling us, right? And these same people get to control the media, to get to control our education, to get to control the legislative bodies, political divides. The left becomes the right, then the right becomes the left. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It's the same crap. Oh, but I'm conservative. Well, in 3 years, the conservatives won't be so conservative. You know, the Democrats will have become conservative. And then a few years later, they'll switch again. And it's like a drama that they put on for us so that we can't see that what's actually going on is that every decade they take away a few more of our rights until one day we will be serfs again. So I've often wondered, how did people become serfs? And what is the thing that we've, during the arm prick adventure, right, that happened in 2020, where they wanted everybody to be, you know, arm pricked. What was one of the things that was being pushed was the notion of you will own nothing, but you will be happy. And this was a slogan that we heard repeatedly by many of the people from the IMF Foundation and the people like, you know, the top financial people. And these are important people. People go, oh yeah, it's not important what he said. Actually, do you know who this guy is? Do you know how much power this guy has to affect financial course of our life? And a lot of jobs have been lost. So Tesla is upscaling robotic production. That's how Tesla makes the money they make, is because they're able to make robots at a scale that nobody else can. And so the amount of robots that are being manufactured, and in China and everywhere around, are incredible. And I don't know if you saw recently, China released the T4. Was it T400? I don't know if you're aware.
New robot, I think.
Yeah.
Something.
These robots can do martial arts.
Really? Oh.
As well as a human. They can do somersaults. A robot that can do somersaults, right? Run, jump, do. The Chinese did an exhibition in the last month. If you go and find it, you watch it, it's mind-blowing. That's where all our jobs are going to go. It's happening. And what's going to happen when there's no more jobs? Well, we're going to have to rely on the state. And then sooner or later, people will own nothing. So how did we become serfs in the Middle Ages? Something happened to make us become serfs. It's like this little drama is replaying itself over and over again. And it seems that we're at that like crucial point where they want to upgrade the New World Order to a point where we'll be watched by drones all the time. All the work will be done by robots and AI. Those that want to get jobs will need to get implants, right? Because the only way you'll be able to work is if you can interface with an AI and robots. And if you can't interface with robots and AI who are doing all the work, then what good are you? So I think like this is why Tesla and many other companies are developing neural implants, because in the future, to get a job won't be easy. And so these will be the criteria for people to get jobs or not. So we're living in a very crazy age where things are completely out of control. And it comes back down to this human biofield energetic system that humans have. You talk about telekinesis. We have the ability to do telekinesis, all of us, but we've forgotten it. And our brains have been dumbed down, and our perspective's been dumbed down. Our connection to energy has been affected. Imagine we're talking about all this electromagnetic energy field moving between the solar wind and through all the different elements of the earth, and it's an exchange happening with the mantle, right? And that moves right through the mantle and the core to the other side of the planet, like we were outlining earlier. What do you think 5G does to that? Right? And 6G and 7G, which is coming next, right? And Wi-Fi and all the radio waves that we've got, the military radio waves and the other radio waves. They haven't shut down the radio waves, by the way. You know that you don't get terrestrial radio anymore, but do you know that they're still broadcasting radios? Like why? They still broadcast these waves. Turn on your radio. There's still something happening. There's still fields out there, energy fields. So I turned on a radio the other day and I was surprised. Like there's something going on. You can hear it. The changes of pitch and frequency has got to do with the different radio waves affecting the crystal in the thing. So they don't disclose to us what they're doing. And our connection to the earth is the key to our awakening on an emotional level, because our hormonal bodies are wired in to the system. And our hormonal bodies are triggered by electrical responses in our body, which is affecting the electromagnetic field, which is affecting our neural pathways, which is passing directly through the endocannabinoid system to interface directly with the hormonal systems. And so our hormonal systems and our neurological systems are all being affected by 5G, by the natural flow of energy between the earth. And so what are ley lines? Ley lines are these energies that have been changed, and where there's water, the frequency becomes somehow amplified in a positive way, because water is a source of life. Everything needs water. And this is why if you go to certain places where there are ley lines, I used to live in, if you go to Avebury, there's 3 circles in Avebury. I take it you know Avebury, yeah? Yes, I used to live in the second circle of Avebury, a stone throw away from the middle circle of Avebury. I lived there for a while when I was in the UK. And I tell you something, powerful. I used to go to the stones frequently, all the time, because it was just over there, right? Walk up my door, it's like 100 meters, not even 100 meters away. Well, it wasn't a straight road. I had to go there and there and there, but as a crow flies, it was close by. And under 100 meters as a crow flies. And I used to sit in that circle all the time. And you can literally feel how it affects your body and how it affects your emotions. And, I think like this technology, because that's what it is, it's spiritual technology, has been taken from us. And wherever I went, everywhere in the UK, I would go and find all the little stone circles, and the king stone. There's usually often a king stone by the stone circles where the kings would do sacrifices on the stone. And those stones, if you go and feel on them and sit on them, there's something going on underneath that stone. If you're sensitive to electromagnetism, like I am very sensitive to it, like I can feel if I walk into a room, I can feel if there's something happening there. And then if I turn and look there, oh, there's a TV on there. Even if there's nothing coming out of the TV, I can feel it on my skin. It's like my skin crawls, like a crawling feeling on my skin. I can't go in a room where there's a microwave because it makes my skin crawl. I can't be in the room. Something about that ionization that doesn't feel nice on my skin, which is what makes me wonder how safe microwaves are, even though they are safe, right? But at the rate of which people are getting cancer these days, you got to wonder, like, what is safe? Cell phones, gosh, where's my cell phone? It's over there. If I spend too much time around my cell phone, I start to feel awkward. You feel the tension build in your body. Yeah, you don't know why. Take the cell phone and put it on the other side of the room, and you suddenly feel And here in South Africa, we used to have power cuts. We were having power problems, and literally, I would be in the garden, I'd be doing something, and I'd suddenly feel, and I'd know the power just went off. When the grid drops, it's like your whole body it's like sighs, and it feels relaxed. Suddenly all your muscles start to relax. Suddenly you feel very tired. You're like, what happened? You walk into the house, you realize, no, the power just went off. So I think all of the power systems, the electrical grids that we use, the particular way that we use technology these days has all been done in such a way that it's not particularly healthy, and it affects our own ability to interface with the energy in the earth. And because we're disconnected from the earth, our natural abilities we're cut off from them, right? Once I held a spider this big in my hand, yeah, in Sri Lanka. I lived in Sri Lanka for like a long time. And when I got to Sri Lanka, I was trying to find a place to go into the jungles. So I rented this house for a few months, and just while I bought a bike, trail bike, and go off and find jungle, go and look in the jungle, ride deep into the jungle on a trail bike and find places where there's water, right? That's the key, because it's dangerous in the jungle if you don't have fresh water. So I had to go and find a water source so that we could, and there's caves, good. Water source and caves, that's where I'm going to live. And like, how far is it from the nearest tiny village? It's like 18-kilometer walk through the jungles to get to the tiny village, and then I can get like lentils and rice and carry it back. There's quite a lot of stuff you can eat in the jungles, by the way. Like, you'll be surprised what you can eat. But I'd get like lots of lentils, rice, and flour, and carry it like 30 kilos on my back. I've always been quite strong, and 30, 40 kilos, and then make a safe place where the animals can't get at it, and then harvest the berries and leaves and nettles, and you get these arbi, you get the kind of food that you get in the jungle that you can eat. They're kind of yams and stuff. They're wild. And anyway, while I was in this house, I put my hand under the sink, and I had lots of spiders living in my house. The place was overrun with spiders, and I was like, oh, I want to keep the spiders. Like, I don't mind all the spiders everywhere, because like I used to be afraid of spiders, and I want to face that fear. I don't think it's natural to be afraid of anything. Like, I wasn't afraid of elephants. I wasn't afraid of like just about any animal, but I was afraid of spiders. You could put a snake in my hand. I could see a snake go over my foot. I'd be fine. But if it was a spider, I'd feel afraid. I was like, that seems like there's something wrong with me, And one day I put my hand under the sink, and I thought I was grabbing a cloth that was in a ball. And I pulled it out, and I felt this legs opening up. And it was like a ball this big, a coiled up spider. And it was black and hairy. And instantly I like did that, and I jumped. Now, in the kitchen where I was living, there wasn't a ceiling. And the first thing I noticed when I jumped was like, I jumped so high, I almost bumped my head on the ceiling. I jumped higher than my head. And I didn't even make an effort. It was like the earth repelled me. I just boing. Why is it we can do that at certain times, but we can't do it all the time? I jumped higher than my own head height. That means I should be able to just stand there and jump up over my own head, right? And other times in my life, I've done similar things, when I've had to. And one time I was surrounded by men with knives, and there were like 4 of them, and I was on a bike. And at that time, it wasn't a big bike. It was an 80cc bike. That wasn't that was just as I got that. First got a little cheap 80cc thing, and then I was like, no, this thing's no good for the jungle. I need a proper trail bike, like a Honda. But these guys came, and they had the sickle. One had a sickle. Another one had like a kind of a long blade. The other guy had something I didn't see. There were 4 of them, and they came and grabbed my hands on the thing. And I had my ex-wife on the back of the bike with me, and I somehow just swept them off the bike, and I swept my ex-wife into the bushes. Somehow I flipped my legs open, and I just took the handlebars of the bike, and I flicked it like a frisbee, and it went like woof, 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 into the bushes. And these guys saw that, big eyes, and they ran for their lives. And I stopped. I was like, oh. My ex-wife said, what the hell did you do with the bike? It's like, how did you do that? Like, I'd accidentally flicked the bike to get it out of the way so I could fight. It was like, they were almost a half circle surrounding me. Instinct, quick, get her out of the way. This man's got a knife. That one's got a blade. Flick the bike out of the way and be ready, And in the process of just getting the bike out of the way, I did something that was not possible. Like, flick a bike with, and when I say flick it, I mean like 10 meters away, right? 10, 15 meters, like just on the handlebar, just one flick. So we have the power to do this when we need to do it, right? And humans will tell you, like a mother gets her babies under a car, or she'll pick up that car, right? There's records of this all around the world. Why can't we do that all the time? It's because we've been locked in. It's like fleas. They did an experiment with fleas, and fleas can jump very high, and they put fleas into a container, and they put a roof on the top of the container, and sooner or later the fleas realized they couldn't jump that high, so they jumped less and less and less and less. And the babies of those fleas, when they took the container off, the babies couldn't jump out of the container because they didn't know that they could jump out. And so we're like that. We're brain locked into this physical reality. We don't know what our true potential is because, we hear, oh, well, Jesus walked on water and the Buddha did this, dematerialized his body, and all these saints and all these people have done. There was a particular saint that used to have to get taken out of the trees all the time. I forget his name. It's quite well catalogued and documented in Europe. He would get high, and then he would float up into the tree, and he'd be holding onto the tree, crying for people to get him out of the tree. But sorry, I've been going on and on. What do you think?
I think it's very, very interesting stories. You have a lot of experience and information about many topics. There's a lot of information to research. I like to do research myself, a lot of things. I'm curious to ask you, like you were living in a jungle in Sri Lanka, and did you meet any indigenous people who are living in the jungle? Are there in Sri Lanka?
In Sri Lanka, I only met some. There were some monks that lived in that jungle. A few of them, they were ascetics, and I got connected to the Nyakatera of the Western Province through them. And he wanted to come and meet me. He was like, a white guy living in a cave in the jungles? But this guy was like a big shot. And I didn't have a passport. I did have a passport, but I didn't have a visa. I'd come there, and I'd gone to live in the jungles. I didn't know how long I'd be there. And I was like, I'm going to live here for the rest of my life in the jungles. I don't want to leave. What do I need a visa for? What do I need a passport? I'm going to live in the jungles. This is where I want to be, And the jungles are like 200 kilometers of jungles. If you don't want to be found, you won't be found, right? And I was like content with that. I was like, I'm content with this. I'm going to develop what I need to develop in these jungles, at which point then none of that other stuff will matter. And so he actually came to the jungles with a translator and spent time with me. And then it turned out he was the Nyakatera. So there's 4 head monks of the Buddhist order. And he wanted me to join his order. And I was like, no, dude, I don't want to be like one thing. I just want to be me. I just want to experience the wildness of the nature. I want to have my relationships with the animals. And I was building relationships with animals while I was living in the jungle. So like I had powerful initiations with the guides and animals. I did meet indigenous shaman in the Himalayas. I did meet a lot. I lived a lot of time in India as well, many years, right? I only lived in Sri Lanka like close to 2 years. India, I must have lived 7, 8, 9 years cumulatively, maybe more. Spent a lot of time in Nepal as well. But in India, Hamara Hindustani Bhasa kam se kam chalte ho gaya. So I learned to speak some Pahari, some Nepali, some Hindi, even a little bit of Urdu, a mixed masala language, because different regions with different languages. But I wasn't taught. I just learned because I could feel what people were thinking and saying, and I would backward engineering. They must be saying this. And then I'd try and say that, and then someone would say to me, yes, you're right. How do you know? I was just a guess. And so other people would correct me and say, no, this word is this word. Don't say that word. It's the wrong word. You can't talk about a lady like that. I'm like, whoops. Yeah, I didn't mean that. I made this. I thought it was something else, But I did meet shaman in the Himalaya. I met Agora as well in the Himalaya. I lived in different ashrams for years as well. I was with a Kendra Guruji who had a Kendra ashram that was in the desert. I went to live in the deserts as well in Rajasthan. I fell in love with the desert because they're eagles, and I've always been drawn to eagles. And I used to sit in the mornings in meditation. The eagles would come and sit around me. Big eagles. When they sit next to you, they're as big as you are sitting on the ground, and they would surround me, and I would feel like they've come to protect me, and they would be like literally like almost their wing brushing my arm, like they'd be all around me. They were like attracted to me. And once I had one land on my head, big eagles, huge, came down, swooped down, and he stopped almost in midair and put his feet on my head, and he stood poised, and then he flew off. And so like everybody thought this was a sign, this is India. That's like some religious sign, because that doesn't happen. But I had a very special connection with the eagles, and so I lived in Guruji Ashram, he's a Kendra Guru of Kendra. I spent time in other ashrams of Tantraman ashrams, which were like secret ashrams. Like the Kendra Guru ashram is not for white people. You're not allowed to go there. So I went to his ashram, and he said, no, I don't want Westerners in my ashram. So I said, okay, I'm going to sit at the gate. I sat at the gate and meditate at the gate for like 10 hours. And then I come back and I do it again and again and again. And after about 1.5 months of sitting there like every day meditation, everybody in the ashram was talking about, this guy sits meditating from sun up to sundown at the gate. Who the hell is he? In the end, the Guruji was inviting me into the ashram saying, okay, who the hell are you? I was like, dude, I said, I'm here. I want to learn. This is what I'm here for. He said, well, you've obviously got practice and you obviously disciplined, so you can come in my ashram, but I don't normally want white people in my ashram, So that's how I learned to speak some Hindi. And then there was another ashram, a Tantraman ashram where I lived, where there were a lot of Tantra yogis. And the main Guruji of the ashram, there was something not quite right. And that was near to Vrindavan on the Yamuna River. And I spent time with Agors. I'm not an Agor, but I spent time with Agors learning about Kali Mata up in Almora district and above Almora district, up in the Lake district in the Himalaya in Uttarkashi. And I was very connected to a shaman that was a Nepali shaman that had traveled between Nepal and that part of Uttarkashi, which is like right on the side of like the borders close to Nepal. And I became very close to this shaman. And there was another shaman that I'd met as well that had come to me. It found me. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of connections I've had with like indigenous people in the Himalaya. And some here in South Africa, but not so much. What I've discovered in South Africa is most of the Sangomas and most of the Utkoikas and the Inyamas like a sorcerer. They do like black magic and stuff. So we've got a problem here, for example, with lion poaching. They use the bones of the lions to make muti. And the muti is like important for like people go and pay the money and they get the lion bones and pieces of the lion to make muti so that these people will using the lion muti is for like prominence of career and money and success, if that makes sense. So everybody wants that. So we've got a problem here with these guys, and I've heard of stories of children disappearing and them using parts of children for their muti as well. So unfortunately, very often there's darkness attached to many of these indigenous healers, or so-called healers. I don't know. Well, I wouldn't say that that's all of them, but I do know that some of them are that way. As a shaman, I work here. I've had clients come to me and they've got something wrong spiritually, and I can see like someone's put an attack on them, and it's these muti people, these inyamas. So like, they do things, not good things for money, basically. And this is a problem in India as well. Like one of the Babajis I spent a lot of time was with a Babaji from Nagaland. He was a Juna Akara Babaji who had been initiated in the Juna Akara tradition in Pashupatinath, in Nepal. And it's an amazing complex of temples if you go to Pashupatinath. It's an incredible place. The energy, the ley line potential energy, if you spend time there, your consciousness alters. It's beautiful. So there are places in the world where you can go which is still pure, where you can experience this different current of energy, and it makes you feel different physically and emotionally and mentally. But yeah, a lot of the indigenous people that I've met, and when I lived up in the Uttarkashi, up in the higher ranges, I met a lot of people that don't go to towns. They don't have electricity, they don't have running water. And I lived like that for probably about two and a half years. I took a vow of poverty, and I lived up in that higher range of Uttarkashi. And I was barefoot, and I learned from this one shaman how to find food. What can you eat? The Shiva fowl, the ranigeti, the different kinds of yams of that district. These berries are good. Those berries are poisonous. This is, those leaves, you can cook those leaves of these food and make that kind of thing. So I learned quite a lot about like survival skills when I lived up there. But a lot of the people that I met, the indigenous people, and it really broke my heart because they were all wanting to go to the cities. I was like, what's wrong with you? You live here. Why would you want to go to other places? No, but there's like, they'd like to get money and they want to get all these things. They want to get a car. I'm like, you don't understand. You're eating biodynamic, organic food that's grown on the earth where you live. The air's clean, the water's clean. There's no nonsense here. The people are simple. They're not dishonest. You go down to the city, Indian cities are heavier. You go like, I've been standing on an Indian sidewalk before, and I've almost beat a guy up. Stranger, he came to offer me a child. He said, "What you want? Do you want a woman? Do you want a sexy? I was like, no. He said, no. I bring you child, small child, 8 years, 7 years. I grabbed the guy. I was going to smack him, and at that point, like other people came, and I said, no, this guy wants to sell me a child. And they said, no, leave him alone. And I left him alone, but I got quite like, Indian cities, heavy place, stand on the wrong street corner for too long and people come and offer you all sorts of things, drugs, this, that. So, it's the same in a lot of big cities, but you'll see in India, polarity. You go to one place, it's indigenous people living a beautiful, simple life. You go to another place, it's like dog eat dog, But yeah, I was very inspired by a lot of the indigenous people up in Uttarkashi, which is a very traditional part of India, where the globalists haven't reached yet. The only thing I did notice was there were more and more solar panels popping up as I was living there. They would get solar panels and a battery. And I noticed like when I first came there were few people, and suddenly solar panels were becoming more and more apparent up there because they didn't have electricity or anything. They would just use it for like a bit of light, just to have light, and this and that, and like a little bit of electricity for because you can't get like mobile phones or anything. Well, maybe now you can, but my point is they were developing this fast, and I don't even know whether these indigenous people are indigenous anymore, because in those times there weren't roads going into a lot of these parts there. So if you go up from like Haldwani side and you go up along north, the roads close out. There's like jeep roads, and the jeep only comes like at certain times when the road hasn't collapsed, because the mountains are quite prolific. And it's very sad to me to watch the demise of such a beautiful place and watch the globalist agenda growing. This centralized model of cities, pollution that we live with. And those people up there were living beautiful lives, and they didn't know it. They thought they needed more. They thought they wanted more. So that's what I've noticed with indigenous people. They've been brainwashed into believing that their way of life is inferior and that they need to come and join the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm also curious to know a little bit. Have you met indigenous people also in South Africa or elsewhere in Africa?
The sad truth about indigenous people in South Africa is this, and okay, let me not speak for South Africa. Let me speak about the Western Cape where I am, right? The Western Cape, which is the southern part of South Africa. Our indigenous people are the San people, the Khoi people. We call them the Khoisan. And they got the most clicks out of any click in the language. Like, I can't speak that language. And they've all but died down. They've all but died out. I know a few of the people that have a high Khoisan heritage that I've met, but they're not indigenous anymore. Like, they're now living in towns and they're like clothes like us, cell phones. Do you understand? This is what's happened. And they can tell you interesting stuff because they've heard stuff from their grandparents that told them interesting stuff. So what happened, unfortunately, was the San people were shot, most of them. They were shot by farmers, often, because the San people didn't understand ownership. They didn't understand how that cow belongs to you. No, but the cow's there in the field. Well, why are you shooting him? No, but that's my cow. No, but there's the cow. They didn't have a word for ownership in their language. So they used to go and take the animals, and the animals were livestock.
Your microphone is muted again.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. Yeah, the San people were pushed down, right? And they were pushed down. So what happened was, in South Africa, there were not many Xhosa or Zulu people. There were hardly any Xhosa people. That was in the north of the country. And there was an invasion of the Zulus that came down into Southern Africa. And the Zulus were pushing down, and there was the great wave of Chaka Zulu, who brought all of the Zulu people down. And the Zulu was a warring nation. And he went through district to district, and he basically was like, you're not alive or you join my army. And the men were like, we'll join your army. And so his army got bigger and bigger and bigger because he was so ruthless. And he came down coming into the northern part of South Africa, and he chased. And so the Xhosas that were in the northern part of South Africa had to flee down south. So a lot of the Xhosa people came down south. So the Zulu people, were chasing the Xhosa people down, and the Xhosa people were fleeing, and they were chasing the indigenous San people down, because they were also a little bit of a warring nation. So a lot of the Xhosa people came to settle here in the Western Cape. So we've got a lot of Xhosa people, but they're not indigenous per se. They were sort of pushed down from like 3,000 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers away down to here, or 1.5 maybe, down to here. And the Zulus came down into the north of the country. And at that time, the Dutch had basically been, had pretty much dominion over the country. And then the British and the Dutch fought a war over Cape Town, and the British won. But then they said, well, you have it as a Dutch colony, but we want to have free shipping rights, basically for trade and stuff. And so the Dutch became the Afrikaner people, which is a Norse tradition, right? There's a heritage there of Norse heritage. The Dutch are very rich in the Norse. That's why the Dutch are so big, right? And I've got some Dutch from my mom's side. I'm Irish and Welsh from my dad's side, right? And I think there's a bit of French in there from my mom's side too, sort of mixed in. Some Prussian apparently in the roots somewhere. And according to my mom's father, but that's not verified. And so the people that are here have been here for so many hundreds of years, but they're not indigenous. There are some Afrikaners that are more indigenous in Cape Town than the Xhosa, because the Dutch came here, and then there was just the Khoisan people originally, and then the Xhosa people also came here because there was work available, and the Dutch farmers were looking for people to help work their land. So they came migrating down here for a better life. So the only indigenous people were the San people, and most of the San have been wiped out. But we've got a new population here called the colored population. It's an official word, and that means it's an amalgamation between the San people, the Xhosa people, the white people, and even Arabic people that came down here. So you've got this huge colored population where there's a lot of indigenous genes in them, and I can read it in people. Like there's a particular look that you get with the indigenous people. They're really very clever, very clever. The Cape Town colored people are extremely funny. They are the funniest people you ever meet in your life. They're hilarious because they're clever. Their brains work like in a different way. And those San intelligence, like they could go into the desert with nothing and survive, right? All they needed was a stick and a stone, and they could find water and food and everything they needed in a total desert where the rest of us would survive 3 days, and that would be the end of that. And that takes a level of intelligence. And so you can see that intelligence in some of the population here, which is native only to the Western Cape. And that gives the Western Cape its own sort of character. And so there are indigenous people, but they're mixed in, unfortunately. There are some indigenous people in Namibia. We were raising money for them in 2001. I'm a percussionist, and I used to go and play in places, and we used to raise money. We used to have a group of us musicians, percussionists. We used to play money, do concerts, and we used to raise money, and we used to send it to the indigenous people in Namibia because they were being chased and they wanted to get the rights to their land. So there are some indigenous people in Namibia, but Namibia is no longer a part of South Africa. It's now separate. And you don't see those people because they're not in the cities. They're off. They literally are some actual indigenous people off in their indigenous lands. So unfortunately, I don't have contact with those people. That's about, I think, 1,600, 2,000 kilometers away. So it's quite a distance away. I went there many years ago when I was younger, and I met some of the indigenous people with my dad. My dad was a very gregarious social person, and he loved everybody. My dad used to play gospel music in the black churches when he wasn't allowed to. They had to sneak him in to the back door, and I wanted to go with, and he was so scared because he would have been arrested if he had been found playing music in that church, right? Because you weren't allowed to go into that church if you were white. And so I was always around like mixed people as a child. It's probably why I get on better with people that aren't white very often. It's why I spend much of my life in places where people aren't white, because I somehow feel that the white people are more guarded. The not white skinned people tend to be more open, and the more indigenous you go, the more open they get. So the not white skinned people are a little more indigenous in their attitudes towards life. And if you keep going like into the far reaches, like where I've met the people in the Himalayas, they'll sit in their field in peace, quiet, and you go and hang out with them. You sit in the field with them. You just sit there quietly for like an hour. That's like, wow, this is a cool way of living, you know? You don't know what you got, mate. In the West, we're just like, we don't have an hour to just sit around. But yeah, many of the indigenous people, they're being lost. And I'm pretty sure in Namibia it's the same thing, because now there's money and technology and mobile phones. And so probably a lot of those indigenous people now have got cell phones, and they're having their minds polluted with all of the, psyop nonsense that we're being programmed with, all the media. It's a little bit sad, really. But I wish I could say more about indigenous people.
Yeah, I'm just curious about indigenous, because I have met some Brazilian from the Amazon jungle up in some ayahuasca ceremonies, and I also read books from indigenous people, and I also see that there's a lot of wisdom in their traditions. So I'm fascinated by indigenous people and the wisdom very much. And it's also interesting what you say about this. People who are not like European are more open in a way. I spent a lot of time in India. I've been there 7 times, and also my wife is from Mexico. Yeah, and I also feel a bit like people who are not European, there somehow the mind is more kind of open to understand things in a different way. We in the West, we are like very analytical, like everything has to be very logical. And I think that's also a big kind of problem for us.
I missed some of what you were saying because something went weird with my audio. I think I might have bumped one of the cables while I was talking, and I can't change from my. I can't seem to set my mic settings here. But I wish I could. I noticed we've been on for almost an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah, it's close to 2 hours. So if you have anything like important to say, of course, it's important for people to know how to find you, to get more of your interesting information. Oh, your microphone is muted again. We can't hear you because your microphone. Oh, okay.
Could I go out of the studio and come back into the studio quickly? It will take me about 30 seconds.
Yes, sure.
Okay, I'll be back right now.
Okay, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I had bumped the cable that goes into my computer with my arm, and it was making like a sound, but it's normal again now. I didn't hear everything that you said the last time. I don't know if it's possible to give me a synopsis of the last part that you said.
Sure. Like I was just saying, I'm very fascinated with the indigenous people and their cultures. I met also indigenous people, mainly from Amazon jungle. I've been to some ayahuasca ceremonies, and I read a lot of these. Like I read some books from there was some African shaman. I read a book from him, and I'm fascinated about indigenous people. I would like to travel around and learn from them. And then I was saying it's fascinating also what you said about European people, people who are not European are more kind of open-minded. And I was saying I find it's because we are so in our mind, like everything has to make sense, and we are very logic. And I think sometimes it's stopping us from being like really smart, like intelligent.
In Vedic cosmology, they explain this quite well, and that you've got an Ida and a Pingala nerve flowing force through the body, and running through the left side of the body, you've got an Ida flow, And the ida flow is related to your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland is obviously relating to all of your hormonal systems. And so you've got a hypothalamus. And the pituitary gland is situated on the hypothalamus. And all of your hormonal, emotional intelligence, emotional reactions are governed by this. And on the right-hand side of the current of the body, you have the pingala. And the pingala is related to the pineal gland. And the pineal gland manages the central nervous system and the neurology. And the frequencies of the electrical impulses in the brain are all managed because this is connected to the thalamus. And it also filters all of the senses, all the information from the senses, except for smell. Smell roots deep down, which is why we burn incense, right? Because it bypasses the thinking process, sense of smell, which is very interesting. The more you practice smelling things, the less you think. Isn't that interesting? It's like an animal sense. Kicks us back into our animal state, which is where, and I think indigenous people are naturally in that state of consciousness. I think we would be too if we hadn't gone to school. I think that's where the problem starts. It's the education system. And so the right-hand current of the body is obviously related very much to the left side of the brain and to the front side of the brain. And the left-hand current is related very much to the right side of the brain and to the back side of the brain. And in the same way, we got a current flowing up the back, right? And a current flowing down the front, right? Of our energy bodies as well. So you can see how these are correlating the four quadrants of the brain, reducing to these two principles, and the one's like a fiery principle, the one's like a very deep emotional principle. And I think that we've been educated to believe that feeling is bad, feeling is weakness. As a man shouldn't have emotions. Man should be logical, right? But what a man needs is to be in touch with his feelings, and like to learn to cry if you're sad, to learn to laugh and to express your feelings, right? So I think we've been like badly indoctrinated through our culture and through our education systems. And it's like, if you look at the Norse tradition, right? The Norse, like you go back, like your indigenous background, like men would cry together, men would laugh together, men would go to battle together, right? They were brothers, like they would hold hands. They would be, in India, you see it too. Men aren't afraid to be men. Like if a man and a man are walking and they might be like arm around each other walking, it's not like gay, it's just natural expression of affection. And I walk down the road, I put my arm around my son, it's normal, right? But if I were to do it with a friend, people would think, oh, you must be gay. So we've got these stereotypes in our brain that it's not right for men. And like I did this when I was in high school. A group of friends, we used to go climb the mountain and take off all our clothes and sit on the rocks on the top of Skeleton Gorge, and we used to talk philosophy. And the reason we used to do it was because we noticed that if we went up there, the one day we went up there and we were sunbathing, right? We were like, and we were having a conversation. We noticed like, wow, when we're not wearing clothes, we have really deep conversations. Why is that? So we decided to go up there and test this as a theory. And every time we went up there, we'd take off our clothes and then we'd initiate another friend into the circle and say, come join us. And they'd come up there and they'd feel all awkward about taking off the clothes and say, just sit on a rock, pick a rock, and we're just going to talk. And we would have deep philosophical conversations. And it's like, I think our clothes, our fashion, this is who I am, this is how I look, all these layers that we put over ourselves are like programming tools, right? And when we strip away all of the programming tools, then we become indigenous. And I think we all have that ability, and it's programmed into us to be so difficult and far away. But actually, it's that easy. Like this, it's what I've noticed. Like being in places where on Chofak Ziv, I lived for a long time in Israel. I spent like almost a couple of years in Israel, and this is many years ago. It's like in the 90s. And there was a master of the Kabbalah who used to teach Kabbalah at the Hebrew University who had found me. And he his friends were all like faculty members of the Kabbalist Institute, and they used to come and spend time with me on Chovak Ziv, and we used to have these cool conversations. And I met a group of interesting people that were activists, and they would go and camp naked on Metsugai Dargot, which is on the Dead Sea. And I went to spend some time at Metsugai Dargot, spent some weeks there, and not wearing clothes. And it's incredible. If you don't wear clothes for like a month or 3 weeks, you're a different person. You know, you're not the same. I think this is who I think I am. Drop all the pretenses, drop all the acts. There's a lot of people around. There's women around. There's men around. There's nothing to pretend. This is who I am. This is what I am physically. This is what I am mentally. This is, you know, there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to, and so I think like a big part of our problem is that we're so culturally hinged and set into particular behavioral patterns. And in India, you've got the Naga Babas, and these Naga Babas walk around stark naked. And the one day I'll never forget, I laughed so hard. I heard this clang, 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 and it sounded like somebody knocking cymbals together. And I turned around, and naturally I looked at the source of the sound, and this guy had cymbals attached to his testicles, right? And he had all these cymbals and stuff attached to his, and he was walking, and they were clanging, clanging. So everybody turns around and they look, they look straight at it. And that's just such a normal thing in India. People just go, oh, it's a Naga Baba. He's a naked devotee. He walks around naked. That's what he does. And there's no big deal about it. If somebody did that in the West, there'd be an outcry. So I agree with you. I think that there's a big issue, and my boy is 9 years old now, so I'm in my 50s. I'm turning 51, and I waited till I was older to have a child because I spent my life traveling. Right, like I say, I spent a couple of decades traveling. So in my 20s, right into 20s into 40. I was traveling, and it's very difficult these days having a child. I mean, I'm sure you've been through it, right?
Actually, I haven't. No.
Oh, you haven't? Well, I tell you what, it's not easy. Like I school him at home because I'm too scared to send him to school, but I have to give him a proper education. So I've got online school, which is based in the UK syllabus here in South Africa. That way the South African government's not on my back because it's a UK syllabus. And I get to be a witness to what he's being taught, if that makes sense, because like it's through Zoom. So I can have a chat with him after his class and say, that thing the teacher said, I don't know about that. So he gets another opinion. And it must be so difficult for parents because now in South Africa, they're trying to change the laws and make it harder and harder for people to school their children at home. And this is a global trend. They want access to our kids. And, the children is, that's really where the focus needs to be for if we want to make the world a better place, we need to help our children to understand that you can't trust the government necessarily. You can't trust what they write in the books necessarily. You have to figure it out for yourself. It's the only way you're ever going to know anything. And, you can't even trust the food you buy in the shops. You can't trust the water that comes out of the taps, right? Because, you don't know where it's been. And so, yeah, I mean, I really feel for the people that are having babies now. When my child was born, they wanted to vaccinate him. And I had a lawyer on fast dial just in case there was going to be a problem. Right? I'd given a lawyer a retainer. And they said, no, he has to be vaccinated. It's the law. And I said, no, he doesn't. They said, yes, he does. I said, well, go and fetch a doctor for me and let the doctor know I've got a lawyer on retainer. And the moment I hit that button, we are going to have a problem in court because I'm going to want the money for my legal fees. So go and get the doctor. And the nurse went to speak to the doctor. and came back. And she was shocked. I said, well, what's wrong? She said, you're right. You don't have to have your child vaccinated. I thought it was the law. I said, so you've been telling people every time that they just have to have them vaccinated? She said, yeah. And I said, everybody has their children vaccinated? Yeah. So my son wasn't vaccinated. And touch wood, he's never been sick. The most he's been ill in his life has been for half a day. Tummy bug. If he has a tummy bug in the morning, it's gone in the afternoon. Like literally, like that's how healthy he is. He's 9 years old. His nutrition is superfluous. He eats a little bit of seafood, but mostly he's been a vegetarian, plant-based diet. He weighs 45 kilograms. He's 9 years old. His little muscles is built like this. I take him and climb the mountain. Normally we climb the mountain in the morning, 6 kilometers, 3 up, 3 down, you know. There's a mountain here. I live by the sea. I live by the nature reserve. It helps me for my work. You know, I feel very privileged and lucky that I've been able to have this and, you know, touch wood, been blessed with this lifestyle. But I really feel for all the children out there, you know, and all my friends that had children, they tell me their children are always sick. The children go to the school, they come home, they're sick. Oh, they had this vaccination, they got sick afterwards. Now they're sick because they had a shot. And my child looks like he's 11 because he's grown so strong and big. Because if a child never gets sick, they never stop growing, right? Every time, it's like a plant, right? If you've got 3 plants in your garden and you're growing your plants, then if one of the plants gets sick, it will stunt its growth, yeah? And later on, you'll see the other plants are bigger. Like, let's say you've got 3 tomato bushes, and one of the tomato bushes gets eaten by snails and then gets a little sick. That tomato bush will always be behind the other tomato bush, and you'll actually be able to see the difference, and you'll go like, wow, that tomato bush was only sick for 1 week or 2 weeks. Look how much it lost, and it'll never catch up. Children are like that. They're not different to tomato bushes. So most children get sick all the time because of the way they are fed, because of their vaccinations, because of the school environment, because of everything. And so they don't grow properly. So like my boy, he can't play with other children his age and stewie, you know, stewie, or like wrestle, or he can't. He's too strong. He'll throw the kids around. He needs to wrestle with a child that's 12 or 11. You know, he's just too physically strong. He's physically superior to all the other kids, and it's not because I got like huge genetics or anything. He's just optimal. He's just so the idea with children is we need to go back to what our forefathers taught us. Like, your child should never get sick. People take their child, they get a shot, then they go to the doctor 3 days later, and the doctor smiles and says, "No, this is great. It's working. The vaccine is working. That's why your child's sick." Oh. Then they go home, and now the child's sick for like a week and a half, and the child gets over the sickness, and they've lost 2 weeks of growth time, right? So you take 20 vaccines over 3 years, that's 40 weeks of growth time lost. You add that into the child's metabolism and growth. If you did that with a plant, the plant would be stunted. So most human beings are physically stunted, psychologically, neurologically, stunted in all ways because of our medical invasion that we call, you know, that they want babies now to get 20 shots by the time they're 2 years old. You know, it's just ridiculous. Like, and my child is a perfect example of what happens when you don't ever. He's never been to a doctor in his life. I was supposed to take him back to a doctor after I took him from the hospital. I never did. It's God bless that I never did, because he's just so healthy. Other people can't understand when they see him. They say, "Is he only 9 years old?" I say, "Yes." They say, "But he thinks like an older boy." I say, "Yeah, he thinks like an older boy." And he's physically, like, he's strong, like his mother, you know. When he gets playful with his mother, she's like, she can't handle him. He's too physically strong. Like, I've got to come and say, "Dude, don't play with your mom like this. She's not a child," you know. Just about pick her up and carry her around. So, you know, I think the way we're bringing up our children is a big problem in the society, and it's why we are the way we are, because we were conditioned in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So also the indigenous are wise because they never had the education that kind of takes them out of the being the wiseness. Like you said, the education system makes people kind of lose their common sense. That's my feeling.
You know, personally, like I think I've got a lot of animals here. I've got 3 dogs, got 2 bunnies here. I got the other 8 bunnies in the quad outside. These 2 bunnies can't be with the other bunnies because this bunny's almost been like badly injured by the other bunnies. He fights the territorial things. There's 2 wannabe alphas in one pack. It just doesn't work. So I had to bring him here, and I couldn't bring him alone. So I brought his one little sister with him, and so they got each other for company. And they cruise around here. They cruise around with my dogs, and my dogs are like an Alaskan Malamute. He's a big one. He's a beautiful dog, very intelligent. A golden retriever, and there's a little Pekingese. And we've got cockatiels as well. My son's mom's got 5 cockatiels. I got 1 cockatiel. He's sleeping now, but he's usually on my shoulder like most of the day and walking around. He walks around with the dogs. He goes and sits with the bunnies and the dogs and everything. So I think this is what's wrong is we're disconnected from nature. And I'm lucky enough to live in a place where there's like lots of plants and trees and wilderness and mountain. And we've got mongoose nesting in our property here. And sometimes we got the little rodents that come over here. They're called dassies, the hyrax. And we've even got the big cats that come here sometimes. One of them caught one of my bunnies once. They're quite a big cat. They are caracal. I don't know if you know them. They're like, it's the size of a dog, but it's a cat. And wild cats, obviously. And, you know, a lot of bird life. I had an owl here a while ago, sitting by my window, staring at me. And I came out, I spent an hour with the owl during broad daylight. And she sat there. I was like close enough to touch her. She was like talking to me, you know. We've forgotten to be engaging with animals and nature. And I think that like the moment humans step out of this concrete jungle and we step back into a place where we start engaging with animals, that's when we start to become natural again. I think that's the way forward, to re-engage with nature, to re-engage with animals, to go back to that simple way of like just being on a dog's level or a cat's level or being on, you know, bird's level. And it makes us become a little more natural and instinctive and humble in a way, because as humans, we are a step above everybody else, you know? And then we realize that we're also an animal like the animals. I think we forget that. We're the most incredible animal in the world that have forgotten that we're animals.
Yeah, thank you very much for all this discussion. You do have a YouTube channel and Instagram. Is there any other way that people can get hold of you?
It was an honor, and thank you very, very, very much. I hope I'm not saying your name wrong. Narahari.
Yes,
Narahari.
it is correct. Yes.
Is that correct? Because you did say it earlier, and I was like, I didn't actually get to say it, Narahari, but it's a really interesting name. Like, yeah?
Yeah, I got it from a teacher who lived in India for 27 years, so I changed it in my passport. It's from India, the name.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's got Sanskrit roots there. I was like, I thought maybe Finland people had Sanskrit names. So I've seen this before. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, a lot of our languages are all blended. Yes. That's beautiful. So nar is the prefix which relates to the animal of a lion. That's why you got the Narasimha. You know, and it's also related to serpent on another level. Lion and serpent. And if you look at the astrological sign of Leo, it's a serpent. Look at the sign. It's a snake. And the Hari is obviously, that's a deity name. Yeah, that's a powerful name to have.
Thank
So,
you.
much love.
Yes, and your name is Franklin, is it?
Franklin, yes, Franklin.
Yes.
And everybody, you can find me at Bush Whisperer. If you put at Bush Whisperer into YouTube or Instagram, or at Bush Whisperer Speaks into TikTok. I don't use Instagram and TikTok, but like Facebook at Bush Whisperer, and you'll find me around. I've got also a whole lot of. I've got interesting things. I've done workshops. They're free workshops that you can gain, like shadow work, meditation, and there's a lot of different discussions. The Enneagram system, I've been unpacking the Enneagram system from ancient Chaldea, not the modern New Age Enneagram system that was invented by the psychologists in 1920 to 1960. The old Enneagram based upon the old numerology. So it's a little bit different because they've changed it. Everything's being psyopsed in modern times, you know. Even India, right? They've redesigned, like the Akasha. They talk about the Akashic records. But if you look at what the Akasha is and the way the Akashic records are described in the New Age, it's not the same. But they got that from Blavatsky. Blavatsky was speaking about the Akasha, right? As well as other people from the Theosophical Society, and then later on Rudolf Steiner and, you know, the anthroposophists were also discussing it because they were strongly led by people that were inspired in India, so obviously. But yeah, that's an interesting point, you know. Everything is being mismatched. The modern idea of yoga isn't yoga, right? You go to India and you see yoga. It's different to the yoga that they're teaching here in the studio, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to look at some of your interesting videos and other things. There's so much information here that I want to study more. So thank you very much.
It's been an honor, dear Narahari, and you have an absolutely gorgeous day. Thank you, everybody that's been watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And so much love. Blessed be. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.